Mark Levin avoids the empire question by the Southern Avenger. Mark Levin is one of the most popular conservative voices in America. His radio program reaches 6 million listeners weekly, and his latest book, Liberty and Tyranny, has been on the New York Times bestsellers list for 14 weeks and counting. When my critical review of Levin's book was published at Takimag magazine earlier this month, I curiously wound up on Levin's list of, quote, deranged bloggers at marklevinshow.com, where the boisterous talk host questioned not only my sanity, but my masculinity. That Levin would call me crazy or gay was no big deal, and perhaps a little funny. But refusing to actually link to the book review that got his goat is a big deal, because the primary question I ask in my piece, a question that examines the very root of limited government philosophy, is something that Levin and the conservative establishment he represents still refuses to answer on a consistent basis. Every day, talk radio rails against President Obama's socialism, rightly pointing out that costing America trillions of dollars, whether on so-called stimulus, cap and trade, healthcare, or any other big government scheme, is something this country cannot afford. Conservatives have always believed government should be minimal, limited, and restrained by the Constitution. Spending trillions necessarily means enduring a massive bureaucratic state to oversee the collection and redistribution of taxpayer dollars. A state this large will always trend more toward tyranny than liberty, because it wields such great power. And as Lord Acton once noted, quote, power tends to corrupt, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Forget whether or not you were for or against the Iraq War. Forget whether or not you believe we should continue fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan. Forget whether you believe it is necessary to station hundreds of thousands of American troops around the world. Here are the costs of these realities. The Iraq War was an estimated $3 trillion, and the U.S. military budget for 2008 alone was $711 billion, or 48% of the total cost of global defense. To contrast, the entire continent of Europe only spent $289 billion, or 20% of global defense spending. These are big, big numbers, the kind of spending numbers Obama and the Democrats seem entirely comfortable with. And apparently so are conservatives. Many conservatives believe the trillions spent on the Iraq War, continuing to fight today in Iraq and Afghanistan, and possibly even confrontations with Iran or other nations, is money well spent. For those who do believe this is entirely their prerogative, but they cannot honestly lay any claim to being for small government. They can say that they believe big government is necessary to defend America, but must admit that the America they seek to defend will never again be a nation dedicated to the proposition of limited government. Levin's latest book seeks to combine the philosophy of Thomas Jefferson and George Washington with the promotion of the massive bureaucracy necessary to promote what many have rightly identified as not the Republic of the Founding Fathers, but the ongoing, ever-expanding American empire. Calling his book a conservative manifesto, Levin largely ignores that some of the greatest conservative minds have called into question the very notion of America as the world's policeman. Some of the words of men like 20th century giants Russell Kirk, Richard Weaver, Murray Rothbard, and H.L. Mencken, more contemporary figures like Paul Weyrich, Robert Novak, Pat Buchanan, and Ron Paul, or even military figures like Major General Smedley Butler, General Dwight Eisenhower, General Anthony Zinni, Colonel David Hackworth, General William Odin, and others, the opinions of these men who dared to question their government about the wars they fight would be dismissed as left-wing, liberal, or even statist by talk hosts like Levin. Yet virtually all of these men were conservatives who believe America needs a strong national defense. They just wondered whether much of what America does around the world has actually been about defending the nation, and has the cost of such an empire been worth the price of the republic. But mainstream conservatives don't ask such questions anymore and seem mortified by those who do. Why are they so afraid to confront this glaring philosophical contradiction? Again, my overriding question to Levin, as posed throughout my book review, is how can any conservative claim to be for small government or liberty while enthusiastically promoting the tyranny of big government, even if for reasons they believe are necessary? And my question still stands. Not that I expect someone like Levin to answer answer it. My guess is he would much prefer that such questions go away. In Mark Levin's lucrative role as a talk radio conservative spokesman, the volume of his bark is infinitely more important than the bite of his logic, and certainly more important than entertaining any challenges that might call into question what gives him the right to even call himself a conservative in the first place.